We now have the terrific documentary LFG from HBO Max, and we are joined by the film's director, producer, Andrea Nix Fine, by director, producer, and cinematographer Sean Fine, and by one of its main subjects, Becky Sauerbrunn, who is the captain of the U.S. women's national soccer team. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Before we get into the discussion, let's roll a clip from the film, which really gets into the main issues that LFG is about, which is namely pay equity between the U.S. women's soccer national team and the men's team. And in this clip, we see Carlos Cordero, who was at that time the president of the U.S. Soccer Federation, and also star player Megan Rapinoe, discussing this issue of equal pay. Let's roll that.
We believe at U.S. Soccer that all female athletes deserve fair and equitable pay. One nation, one team, go USA!
I wish that he would have, in the Federation, frankly, would have understood better the moment and the potential that they had to kind of flip the script going forward, because I think they could have come out looking like heroes as well, to be able to stand on the steps of City Hall and being like, we're going to do this with our team. Obviously, they weren't prepared to do that, and they didn't do that.
To the Federation, Carlos, everybody gets booed. Everybody in the position of power gets booed. I'm gonna stick my neck out there a little bit. I'm going to endorse Carlos. I think he's with us. I think he's on the right side of things. I think he's going to make things right. Thank you. We look forward to holding those feet to the fire. With our fight with the Federation, sorry for some of the things I said. Not all of the things. But it's time to come together. It's our responsibility to make this world a better place. I think this team does an incredible job of taking that on our shoulders and understanding the position that we have and the platform that we have within this world. Yes, we play sports. Yes, we play soccer. Yes, we're female athletes, but we're so much more than that. You're so much more than that. We have to collaborate. It takes everybody. Please, I ask
you. This is a legal battle that has been going on for a long time. The women filed their lawsuit in 2019, but the issue of equal pay has really been around for a long time. Andrea and Sean, can you sort of describe what it all boils down to?
I think it's really, for us in this film, it's getting inside. What does it mean to get inside a journey where people are fighting for equality? I think that's why this film resonates beyond the equal pay discussion. I think it's about being seen and valued and meeting you where you're at. And I believe that's why people really respond to these women and the way in which they take you inside their fight as a collective, but also as individuals, about what it means to them. And I think it's about kind of taking control of things in the way that you want to see your future go forward. And ultimately, how you're paid is how you're valued. So that's kind of where it starts. It's not all about the money. It's about respect and control, in a way, of, you know, how you perform your best in a workplace, on the soccer field, you know, as an individual, across the table, in any kind of discussion.
And Becky, why have you been willing to fight this battle? Because in many respects, it is about the future players, but it might be easier in a sense to, who wants to put up with a legal headache?
I mean, to be honest, it was just time. And as for the women that came before us that had played for the program, they started the fight, and every era since then has kind of taken on that mantle. And we got to a point where we felt that we had the support behind us. We had the public support. We had the legal support to finally do something. And yeah, maybe some consider it drastic, but we felt it was the right time. And it's a fight worth fighting. And a lot of us understand that we're not going to benefit from it. And that's okay. That's kind of what it's like to be a woman fighting for equality these days. It's usually for the generations, hopefully, after you.
And Sean, where does the litigation stand right now?
Right now, I mean, Becky could probably talk about this more than me, but so correct me if I'm wrong on anything. But where we left off is that the women and their lawyers have filed appeal, or they're filing an appeal, and that's where it stands right now. They're not stopping. They're appealing the judge's ruling and going forward.
And Becky, I'm curious about how difficult it has been to be engaged in this battle. We see this in the film because as athletes, you want to focus on your performance on the field and all the training. And yet this is an enormous time demand, but just mentally draining, I would think.
Yeah, I would love to be able to show up and just focus on soccer, but that is not the state of things right now, whether we're fighting for pay equality or fighting against racism or homophobia or transphobia. There's always something that we're willing to use our platform and lend our voice to.
So these issues are very complex in the film, and in some ways they're simple. In other respects, they're complex. You get into a courtroom, and naturally it's going to be very complex. As I understand it, U.S. Soccer, the Federation, essentially blames the issue of equal pay on FIFA, which they do not control. FIFA is the organization behind the World Cup. And they blame it on how much more FIFA pays men players in terms of prize money versus women. Andrea, Sean, do you buy that?
Well, no. I mean, because in the end of the day, and actually this is where I'll start it, but I really think this is for Becky to finish, because ultimately they've worked on this for so long and it's really their articulation of it. But from where we sat very early on, it seemed like there was not a lot of transparency, first in terms of the finances, and secondly, when you finally dove into it, what was being said, there was a lot more to it. Yes, FIFA plays the soccer federation, but the soccer federation decides what to do with that money once they have it, right? And that also, they like to claim that the men were, and the women, like, look, the women didn't want this deal. What the film really drives home, and I want the takeaway to be, is that as Megan says it, the discrimination happened when the women were never offered the same deal, dollar for dollar. So they like to say, hey, they accepted this path that they have of being paid a certain way. That's what they decided. It's like, well, you can't decide on what you're never offered. So from where we sat, that is kind of the crux of what needs to get looked at, and continues to also need some transparency. Becky, what do you have to fill in based on anything else that I left out there?
Well, I think you said that perfectly. And I also will go back to FIFA and what investments you're making into the women's game, into the women's tournament. I think a lot of that is, are you willing to put the investment in early so you can see the return later on? And I don't think FIFA has been willing to do that. And Andre, you said it perfectly when you said that they pay the federation and the federation pays us. And so they're just passing, US Soccer is passing down that discrimination.
Another way to look at this is, I was reading the appeal that the attorneys for the women's soccer, the players have filed in this, where they likened the pay discrepancy between men and women to people working in a shoe store. And they said that the employer cannot offer its female employees a lower hourly wage or a lower commission rate and expect them to work more hours, sell more shoes, or both to earn the same total compensation as the male employees. So this speaks to the issue of the fact that women, from one way of looking at it, the women players earn more, but that's really doesn't tell the whole story, does it, Andrea and Sean?
No, I mean, they should earn more because they win more, and they play more tournaments that they win, and they're champions and World Cup champions. So of course they should make more, and they should make a lot more than they make. But if you play, I think that's where kind of the rub lies with this too, is that they win everything. They're so decorated, and they're so good, and they win everything, that they should be making a lot more.
Yeah, because they like to say that the women made more, and even the judge quotes us in the summary judgment, the women ultimately did make more at the end of the time period they're looking at. But what they don't tackle is, well, what did they have to do to get there? So if I'm a real estate agent and I sell, 20 homes and I make $200, and Sean sells 10 homes and he makes, $198, what did I have to do to get there, right? It's the rate. It's like how you equate. So even with the business model, that's what this all looks at. It's a little bit in the fine print, but it's kind of simple. And in that way. So it's like, what did it take for you to get there? And is it fair to think that they only make that money if they have to win every time they step on the field, right? Where the men sometimes aren't even qualifying. It's nothing to say for the men, but it is interesting that the men have actually stepped up in support of the team. The men's team stepped up on these briefings that are given to the appeals process to say who's friends of the court. It's called the amicus brief. And the men's team stepped up in favor and support of the women's right to this, to be compensated this way. So I think that's very interesting in and of itself. It's like, look who's getting behind this. It's time.